The truth that weighs heavily upon our age is that the human being, as an individual, is in danger of vanishing. You may not see it at first, for the world dazzles you with its conveniences, its technologies, its endless currents of noise and distraction. Yet beneath this surface lies a movement of the spirit that is profoundly perilous, the rise of collectivism, the demand that the soul dissolve itself into the mass. I speak to you not as one who wishes to moralize, but as one who has looked into the dark recesses of the psyche, who has wrestled with its archetypes and shadows, who has seen in dreams and in myths the eternal struggle between the one and the many. And I tell you now, with a voice sharpened by necessity, if the individual is extinguished, then the very light of consciousness is extinguished. When I speak of collectivism, I do not mean merely the organization of society or the cooperation that allows civilization to function. Human beings must work together, must share resources, must live in relation to one another, but collectivism becomes destructive when it demands the sacrifice of individuality to an abstract whole, when the living, breathing soul is forced to bow before the idol of the mass. The danger is not only political, though politics has given us abundant examples of how entire nations can fall into madness when the individual disappears. The danger is also psychological and spiritual, for the psyche itself suffers mutilation when it is forbidden to be itself, when it is denied its right to individuate. You may recall that I have spoken often of individuation. This is the process by which the human being becomes who they truly are, by which the unconscious is integrated with the conscious, by which the fragments of the personality are woven into a whole. Individuation is not the path of selfishness, but the path of wholeness. It is the only path by which one may truly serve humanity. For only the individual who has come into possession of their own soul can contribute authentically to the collective, yet collectivism, in its destructive form, despises individuation. It demands conformity. It whispers to you, do not be yourself, be one of us. Silence your own voice. Repeat the slogans we give you. Forget your inner visions and march to the rhythm of the drum. This is the dark truth. Collectivism destroys the individual, and with it the possibility of authentic life. Consider the archetype of the crowd, which has haunted human beings from the beginning. In the crowd, men and women lose themselves. They become faceless, anonymous, absorbed into something larger that feels powerful but is blind. The crowd chants, the crowd rages, the crowd applauds. But who in the crowd takes responsibility? Who in the crowd remains conscious? It is as if a god has possessed them, a god not of light, but of shadow. The individual vanishes, replaced by a fragment of a vast, impersonal organism. This is why the crowd is so often capable of cruelty that the individual alone would never commit. It is why ordinary men and women, when swept into mass movements, perform acts of violence or oppression that would horrify them if they stood alone. The crowd lowers consciousness. It drags the soul into the collective unconscious. And if a society enshrines the crowd as the highest good, it destroys the conditions under which consciousness can grow. Let me tell you a dream. For dreams speak with the language of the unconscious, and reveal what reason alone cannot. A man dreams he is walking through a great city. The buildings are tall and identical, each window lit with the same pale glow. The streets are full of people, yet each wears the same mask, blank and expressionless. He feels himself pulled into the crowd, and soon he too wears the mask. He tries to speak, but his voice is swallowed by the collective murmur. At last, he looks into a mirror in the window of one of the buildings, and he sees that his face has disappeared. There is only the mask. He wakes in terror, for he realizes that he no longer knows who he is. This dream is not the invention of one man, it is the dream of our age. The psyche itself warns us of the danger if we lose the individual. We lose the face, the voice, the soul. Now, I do not speak against community. The individual is not meant to live in isolation, cut off from others, but community and collectivism are not the same. Community is a gathering of individuals, each recognized, each unique, each valued. Collectivism is the erasure of individuality, the reduction of the many into a homogeneous mass. Community is like a forest, where each tree grows in its own shape, yet together they form an ecosystem. Collectivism is like a field of identical stalks planted in rows, trimmed to size, harvested without distinction. The psyche longs for community, but it withers under collectivism. You may ask, why does collectivism arise at all if it is so destructive? The answer lies in the shadow. The shadow is that part of the psyche that we deny, repress, and refuse to integrate. It contains our fears, our weaknesses, our darkness. Collectivism arises when societies refuse to face their own shadow. Instead of confronting the darkness within, they project it onto an enemy, a scapegoat, a dissenter. They say, the evil is not within us, it is in them. Destroy them, and we shall be pure. And so the mass forms united not by love but by hatred, not by consciousness but by projection. In this way, collectivism feeds upon the shadow, and the shadow grows ever more monstrous the more it is denied. Only the individual, through the process of individuation, can confront and integrate the shadow. But when the individual is destroyed, there is no one left to hold the mirror, no one left to redeem the darkness. Look around you and see how this danger manifests in modern life. Social movements, political ideologies, even corporations and technologies all whisper to you, surrender your individuality, merge with us. Let us think for you. It is easier to obey than to question, easier to conform than to stand alone. The psyche, weary of the burden of consciousness, longs to rest in the comfort of the collective. But beware, what seems like comfort is in truth the devouring embrace of the mother archetype in its destructive form. The great mother nourishes, but she also smothers. To remain forever in her arms is to forfeit the possibility of becoming. Collectivism is this devouring mother, promising safety but demanding your soul. And once you are devoured, you no longer live as a conscious being. but as a fragment of an unconscious whole, I tell you to resist this danger is not easy. To be an individual is to stand against the current, to endure the loneliness of not belonging, to bear the suspicion and hostility of those who demand conformity. But this is the heroic path, the path of the self, the path symbolized in myths by the lone wanderer, the prophet in the desert, the one who leaves the village to encounter the unknown. It is the path of Christ in the wilderness, of the Buddha under the tree, of every soul that has dared to individuate. And though the path is difficult, it is the only path by which humanity is preserved. For if there are no individuals, there is no creativity, no conscience, no discovery. Everything great that has ever been achieved in human history has been achieved by an individual who dared to be themselves against the collective. To extinguish the individual is to extinguish the very spark of evolution. We must therefore understand that the struggle between collectivism and individuation is not merely external, but internal. Each of you carries within yourself the temptation to dissolve into the collective. Each of you feels the pull of the crowd, to desire to surrender your freedom in exchange for security. This is the inner battle, the battle between the self and the mass psyche, and it is fought not once, but again and again, in every decision, in every moment when you choose whether to listen to your own soul or to the voice of the collective. The archetypes wage war within you, and you must choose which to serve. There is in the unconscious a powerful archetype I call the self. The self is the totality of the psyche. The center and circumference, the divine image within. Individuation is the process of realizing the self, but collectivism substitutes for the self a counterfeit, the collective ideal, the great banner under which all must march. It says to you, do not seek the self within, seek the collective outside. And so you are led away from the inner center, away from the divine spark, and into the wilderness of the collective. This is why collectivism is not only destructive, but profoundly idolatrous. It demands worship, but it offers no God. It demands sacrifice, but it redeems nothing. Only the self can redeem. Only the self can unite the opposites. Only the self can heal the psyche. To abandon the self for the collective is to abandon salvation for illusion. Do you feel the weight of what I am saying? This is not abstract philosophy. It is the struggle of your own soul. Each time you silence your voice to repeat the voice of the crowd, each time you betray your own vision to conform to the demands of the group, each time you wear the mask to avoid standing out, you participate in the destruction of the individual. And each time you dare to be yourself, to speak your truth, to listen to your dreams, to follow your own path, you participate in the salvation of humanity. The battle is waged in your heart, and its outcome shapes the fate of the world. The temptation of the collective is subtle because it masquerades as virtue. It appeals to your longing for belonging, for acceptance, for certainty in a world filled with ambiguity. It says to you, why struggle with your inner contradictions? Why wander alone in the desert of the soul? Join us, and all questions will be answered, all burdens shared, all wounds healed by the balm of sameness. And yet, what it offers is not wholeness, but amnesia. For in order to join without remainder, you must forget yourself. You must silence the small voice that whispers of your dreams, of your wounds, of your destiny. This silencing is not healing, it is death by suffocation of the psyche. When a people worships the collective, it begins to generate symbols that reflect its hunger for homogeneity. Watch carefully, the symbols of the age reveal its unconscious. In times of individuation, you will see art, dreams, and myths that celebrate uniqueness, the hero, the wanderer, the one who defies the tribe to bring back fire. But in times of collectivism, the symbols shift. They exalt the machine, the regiment, the faceless army marching in unison. Even in architecture, you see it? Endless blocks, identical towers, streets without soul. The psyche speaks through these images, and it is telling us that the danger has already taken root. Do not imagine that the collective is only a political force. It enters into your relationships, your families, your communities. A family that demands that every member think and feel alike becomes a microcosm of the collective. A community that ostracizes the one who dreams differently is already under the spell of the mass. Even in the church, the temptation exists to sacrifice the living encounter with the divine self for the comfort of doctrine repeated without inner experience. True religion calls each soul into direct relation with the numinous, but false religion demands conformity, demands that you submit not to God, but to the opinions of men. The divine cannot be reduced to collective formulas, for God speaks in the depths of each soul, uniquely, mysteriously, in ways that no mass ideology can contain. To understand why the individual must not be dissolved, we must look more deeply into the nature of consciousness itself. Consciousness does not arise from the collective. It arises from the confrontation of the individual with the unconscious. It is born when you, standing alone before the abyss, to choose to see rather than to close your eyes. The collective unconscious is the great reservoir of archetypes, of myths, of the inherited patterns of the species, but only the individual can bring these patterns into the light of awareness, can incarnate them in a unique form. Consciousness is always an act of individuation. If you remove the individual, you remove the possibility of consciousness itself, and the collective remains an unconscious organism, powerful but blind. This is why collectivism always produces unconsciousness. It submerges the individual back into the undifferentiated sea from which consciousness first emerged. Think of the symbol of the sea. In myth, the sea is the primal chaos, the womb of creation, the place where all forms dissolve. To return to the sea is to lose distinction, to become one with the undifferentiated. But consciousness is like land, a firm place upon which one can stand, a place where forms can emerge and endure. The individual is the island rising from the sea. Collectivism seeks to flood the land, to submerge the islands, to return all to the chaotic waters. It promises unity, but it delivers dissolution. The task of individuation is not to drown in the sea, but to build bridges between islands, to connect without dissolving. Only thus can there be both community and individuality. Let us not be deceived by the glitter of progress. The modern age, with its machines and its networks, has given collectivism new and terrifying tools. Never before has it been so easy to spread a single message to millions of minds at once, to demand uniformity, not only in behavior but in thought itself. The machines have become extensions of the collective psyche, amplifiers of its voices, enforcers of its conformity. You are told what to desire, what to fear, what to think, and if you resist, you are shamed, silenced, exiled. The collective now lives not only in the street, but in your pocket, in your ear, in your very nervous system. The battle for individuality has become more urgent, for the pressure to conform is relentless. Do not mistake my words. I am not calling for rebellion for its own sake, nor for the worship of ego. Individuation is not the inflation of the ego, but its transformation. The ego that rebels merely to assert itself is still bound to the collective, for it defines itself in opposition rather than in authenticity. True individuation listens to the deeper voice of the self, which calls each soul to its own destiny. This voice may lead you into conflict with the collective, but it is not born of defiance. It is born of truth. To follow the self is to obey the law written in your own depths, a law that no external authority can dictate. This is not easy, for it requires you to discern between the illusions of ego and the guidance of the self, between the false voices of rebellion and the true voice of destiny. But this is the task of every soul that would remain alive in an age of collectivism. Let me tell you another dream. A woman dreams that she is in a vast hall filled with people. At the front is a throne, upon which sits a great figure, faceless and immense, cloaked in shadow. The people chant in unison, offering their devotion to the figure. The woman feels the pull to join them, but something within her resists. She turns and sees a small door at the side of the hall. She hesitates, for the chanting grows louder, promising safety, belonging, certainty. But she walks through the door. On the other side, she finds herself in a forest, under the stars, alone yet filled with awe. A voice speaks within her. Here is where your soul can breathe. She wakes in tears, knowing she must choose between the hall and the forest, between the collective idol and her own destiny. This dream is the drama of our age. Each of you must decide whether to bow to the faceless throne or to step into the forest of individuation. The path of the forest is not easy. It is filled with shadows, for when you leave the collective, you encounter the unconscious in its raw form. You face loneliness, doubt, the terror of standing without the crowd. But it is only in the forest that you find the self, for the self does not dwell in the hall of idols, but in the depths of nature, in the silence of the inner world, in the encounter with the numinous. And when you find the self, you discover that you are not truly alone. For within the self is the archetype of wholeness that unites all opposites, that connects you to the divine. This connection is deeper than any collective belonging, for it is rooted not in conformity, but in the eternal reality of the soul. Understand this, the destruction of the individual is not merely a social problem, it is a spiritual catastrophe. For the individual is the vessel through which the divine enters the world. Each soul is a unique incarnation of the archetypal reality, a face of God that has never been seen before and will never be seen again. To erase individuality is to erase the image of God in humanity. The collective cannot see God, for God is too vast. Only the individual can encounter the divine in the depths of the soul. This is why prophets, mystics, and visionaries always stand apart from the collective. They are called out, separated, individuated, so that they may hear the voice that the crowd cannot hear. And though they are often rejected by the collective, their witness preserves the soul of humanity. This is the dark truth. Collectivism destroys the individual, and in doing so, it destroys the possibility of consciousness, of creativity, of divinity. The warning is not mine alone. It comes from the depths of the unconscious, from the dreams and visions of countless souls, from the archetypes that whisper in our myths and our nightmares. The danger is real, and it is upon us. But the answer is also within us, to choose individuation, to dare to be oneself, to walk the path of the self, even when the crowd demands otherwise. For only thus can the light of consciousness be preserved. If you listen closely to the currents of your own inner life, you will recognize that collectivism does not merely surround you from without, it rises also from within. The psyche itself contains the longing to dissolve, to surrender to the great whole, to escape the burden of consciousness. By merging with something larger, this longing is ancient, as old as the child's desire to remain in the safety of the mother's womb. It is the archetype of the return, the yearning for the undifferentiated state. And yet consciousness cannot grow if it yields to this longing. Individuation requires the courage to resist regression, to face the anxiety of separateness, to stand as a unique soul before the immensity of existence. Here is where many stumble, for individuation is not only a privilege, but a burden. To become oneself is to bear loneliness, to confront the abyss of freedom, to risk rejection and misunderstanding. Many therefore prefer the comfort of the mass. Even though it strips them of their uniqueness, they say, why should I struggle to know myself? When the collective tells me who I am, why should I wrestle with my own darkness? When the collective provides me with enemies upon whom to project it, why should I endure solitude when I can be surrounded by the noise of the crowd? But the one who yields to these temptations forfeits their soul. The mask of the collective becomes their face, and the silence of the inner voice becomes their truth. The unconscious reveals this danger not only through dreams, but also through myth. Recall the tale of the Tower of Babel. Humanity, united in one language and one purpose, seeks to build a tower that reaches the heavens. But God scatters them, confuses their language, and prevents the completion of the tower on the surface. This story may appear to be a punishment for human ambition, but symbolically, it speaks to the danger of absolute collectivism. For when all speak the same tongue, when all think the same thought, when all merge into a single project, the diversity of the psyche is lost, Consciousness requires difference, tension, opposition. To scatter is not destruction, but preservation by diversifying language. The archetype of God ensures that individuation remains possible. The tower of pure collectivism cannot stand, for it denies the multiplicity upon which life depends. Do not think, however, that individuation is mere isolation. The individuated person does not stand against others with hostility, but brings to them the gift of their uniqueness. When you know yourself, you can meet others without projection, without a demand that they conform to your image. True relationship is possible only between individuals who have become themselves. Collectivism destroys relationship, for it demands uniformity, but individuation creates relationship, for it honors difference. It is precisely when you are most yourself that you are capable of true community. The paradox is that the more you individuate, the more connected you become, not through conformity, but through authenticity. Imagine, if you will, the archetype of the mandala, the sacred circle with a center. Each individual is like a spoke in the wheel, radiating outward from the center. If all spokes collapse into one, the wheel no longer turns. It is only when each retains its own direction, its own angle, that the whole is complete. Collectivism seeks to collapse the spokes into a single line, but individuation preserves the mandala in its fullness. The self, which is the archetype of wholeness, requires diversity within unity. This is the divine order, not sameness, but harmony of differences. The danger of collectivism is particularly acute in times of crisis. When fear grips the psyche, the temptation to surrender individuality becomes overwhelming. In war, in famine, in uncertainty, the cry of the crowd becomes irresistible. Join us, or perish. Fear drives people to sacrifice freedom for security, soul for survival. But beware, the survival of the body is not worth the loss of the soul. History has shown us again and again that in times of crisis, the collective demands blood sacrifices, demands that the individual be offered upon its altar, and those who obey may survive in body, but they die in spirit. Better to endure hardship as oneself than to live as a mask within the crowd. Let us look more closely at the psychology of the mask, for the mask is the instrument by which the collective takes hold of the individual. The persona, as I have often said, is the mask we wear in society. It is necessary, for without it we cannot function in relation to others. But when the persona becomes our only face, when we identify with it completely, we lose contact with the self. The collective loves the persona, for it is predictable, controllable, obedient. The collective despises the true self, for it is unpredictable, creative, dangerous. Thus, collectivism encourages you to strengthen the persona until you forget that it is a mask. It rewards you for conformity, praises you for obedience, showers you with acceptance when you speak its language. But beneath the mask, your soul suffocates. The great task is therefore to remember that you are more than the persona, that behind the mask lives the self, which longs for wholeness. Here is another vision from the unconscious, a young man dreams he's in a theater. All the actors on the stage wear identical masks, and the audience claps in unison. He too is given a mask and told to join the play. At first, he enjoys the applause, the safety of being one among many, but gradually he feels that the mask is burning his skin. He tries to remove it, but it has fused to his face. In terror, he claws at it, and blood flows. Suddenly, he hears a voice from the back of the theater. You must leave the play. He turns and sees a door marked with light. Though the audience boos, he runs through the door, and in the open air, he breathes for the first time. This dream reveals the cost of removing the mask pain, blood, rejection, but it also reveals the reward, freedom, air, life. My friends, we must recognize that individuation is not only a psychological necessity, but also an ethical duty. For the collective, when left unchecked, tends toward barbarism. It loses conscience, for conscience is born in the heart of the individual. It loses creativity, for creativity is born in the solitude of the individual. It loses compassion, for compassion arises from the encounter of one soul with another. To allow the collective to destroy the individual is to allow evil to grow unchecked. Each of you has a responsibility. Therefore, not only to yourself, but to humanity, to resist the erasure of individuality. By becoming yourself, you preserve the possibility of goodness for all. And yet, I know how difficult this task is. The collective mocks the individual. It calls him selfish, eccentric, mad. It threatens them with isolation, with exile, with ruin. The individuated soul must endure ridicule, suspicion, even persecution. But no, this history remembers the individuals, not the masses. The prophets, the visionaries, the artists, the scientists, these were individuals who dared to stand apart. The crowd may have despised them in their time, but it is they who carried humanity forward. The collective resists, but the soul persists, and the soul is eternal. You may wonder, how can I resist the collective without becoming an enemy of others? The answer lies in love. True individuation is not the rejection of others, but the embrace of them as they are. When you are yourself, you can allow others to be themselves. You do not need them to conform to you, nor do you conform to them. You meet in authenticity, in freedom, in truth. This is the love that redeems, the love that arises not from dependency, but from wholeness. The collective knows nothing of this love, for it demands conformity, but the individuated soul radiates it, for it flows from the self. Thus, the greatest resistance to collectivism is not hatred, but the love that springs from individuality. The dark truth is before us, but the light is also within us. If you dare to listen to your dreams, to confront your shadow, to follow the voice of the self, you will become a beacon in an age of darkness. And though the crowd may rage, though the collective may press upon you, you will stand. You will be like a tree in the storm, bending but not breaking. rooted in the depths of the soul. And perhaps your example will awaken others, will remind them of their own forgotten individuality, will spark a fire that cannot be extinguished, for one individual who has found the self is more powerful than 1,000 who have surrendered to the mass. This is the mystery. The individual is the bearer of eternity. You must understand that the struggle for individuality is not a matter for a distant future, but the immediate necessity of your present life. Each day presents you with choices that either preserve or erode your individuality. Each moment asks whether you will listen to the quiet, trembling voice of your own soul or drown it in the thunder of the crowd. This is not a battle fought only on grand stages, but in the smallest acts, whether you will speak your truth when silence is safer, whether you will honor your dream when ridicule is near, whether you will embrace your shadow when projection is easier. Collectivism begins not with armies and slogans, but with a single person's decision to betray their inner voice. And resistance begins likewise with a single decision to remain faithful to oneself. There is a profound danger when the collective dresses itself in the garments of morality. It declares itself virtuous, compassionate, progressive. It tells you that to oppose it is to oppose humanity itself. And so many surrender, not out of fear, but out of a misplaced sense of righteousness. Yet the collective does not love the individual. It only uses the individual as fuel for its machinery. True morality arises only in the heart of the individuated soul, for only there does conscience live. When you obey the collective blindly, you abandon conscience, replacing it with ideology, and ideology, when unexamined, can justify any atrocity. It is the individuated person who says no when the collective demands blood. It is the individuated person who shelters the persecuted when the crowd shouts for stones. Without such individuals, the world descends into barbarism, closed in the illusion of virtue. Do not forget that the unconscious itself longs for individuation. It whispers to you through symbols, dreams, synchronicities. When you betray yourself to the collective, your soul does not rest. It sends you dreams of suffocation, visions of masks, nightmares of losing your face. These are not punishments but warnings, signals from the self that you are abandoning your path. The psyche is merciful. It does not abandon you easily. Even in the depths of collectivist possession, the self sends fragments of light, strange coincidences, inexplicable images, moments of clarity. If you attend to these, they can guide you back to your path. But if you ignore them, if you drown them in noise, if you silence them with conformity, then the light grows dim. The unconscious, neglected, turn destructive. What could have been healing becomes neurosis, and the soul suffers in secret. I must tell you with solemnity, the cost of resisting the collective is real. To be an individual in such a time is to endure misunderstanding, exile, loneliness. Many who attempt it retreat back into the safety of the mass, unable to bear the weight. And yet those who persist find something greater than safety. They find meaning, for meaning does not come from conformity, but from authenticity. The individual who follows the self, who confronts the shadow, who integrates the opposites, discovers a life that is not shallow but profound. They may suffer, but their suffering is meaningful. They may stand alone, but they stand in truth. And truth, though often hidden, is eternal. This is the paradox. In losing the acceptance of the crowd, you gain the embrace of the self. And in the self, you discover your union with the divine. I wish to leave you with an image that has come to me again and again, both in my own visions and in the dreams of many patients. It is the image of a flame. The collective is like a great wind sweeping across the world, extinguishing the small flames of individuality, and yet each soul is given its own flame, fragile but luminous. If you shield it, if you feed it, it grows stronger until it cannot be extinguished. And if enough individuals protect their flames, a light arises that no collective darkness can overcome. But if you abandon your flame, if you let the wind of collectivism snuff it out, then your soul grows cold and the world grows darker. Do not underestimate the power of one flame, for in the deepest night, a single flame can guide many who are lost. Therefore, I call you now to decision. Do not wait for a more convenient time, for the pressure of the collective grows each day. Decide now to honor your dreams, to confront your shadow, to follow the self. Decide now to resist the mask, to preserve your uniqueness, to speak your truth. You may tremble, but courage is not the absence of fear. It is the act of remaining faithful in spite of fear. You may feel alone, but know that countless souls across time have walked this path before you, and their strength lives in the archetypes that guide you: the hero, the prophet, the wanderer, the seeker. They are all within you, waiting to be awakened. Their stories are your story, their courage, your inheritance. Remember, always collectivism destroys the individual, but individuation redeems humanity. The warning is grave, but it is not without hope, for within each of you burns the eternal spark of the self, which no collective can ever truly extinguish. Protect it, nurture it, let it grow into the fullness of who you are. And in so doing, you will not only save yourself, you will save the world from sinking into unconsciousness. For the world is redeemed not by masses, but by individuals who dare to become whole. And so I leave you with this final exhortation. Do not surrender your soul to the faceless crowd. Do not trade your birthright for the illusion of belonging. Dare to stand, dare to suffer, dare to become. For only in becoming yourself do you fulfill the purpose for which you were born. And only in the wholeness of the individuated self does humanity find its true salvation.